Tay Jordan can't be here, but hey, we love you, boo. We know you'll be back with us soon, so we're gonna rock out for you, shorty. We got Will Jawando coming on, so we're excited about that. So we're just gonna get through the first part of the show, and then we'll bring him up. So really excited about the show. Different things we're gonna talk about, community involvement and such like. It's gonna be good. So moving on to just how was your week and all that good stuff. How was your week, Katniss?
My week started out really great, but then yesterday I received some really bad news.
Oh yeah.
Our musical director at our church, we call her Ma. She's like everybody's mom. She passed away, so right now we're all kind of devastated. And she was texting me, Friday, and then to hear Saturday morning that, she's passed away. She wasn't sick. It wasn't like she was in the hospital, just literally like the saying, there one day, gone the next. So the week started out great, but having that news really has bothered me for the past couple of days, because it's just always shocking when someone just goes just unexpectedly.
Yeah, definitely.
So shout out to Carolina Missionary Baptist Church, Pastor Anthony Moore and all her family and the church family. I know that we're going to be impacted, greatly. So shout out to the church.
All right. Well, yeah, definitely shout out to that family and everybody affected by the passing away of our sister in Christ. And also, but yeah, that's a sad thing. As far as my week, Jay DeCosta, I'm the man of these streets. Work has been well, so I can't complain there. Great things going on with the nitty gritty. A lot of people did tune in to check out our Tim Wise episode. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely live. If you haven't had a chance to check out our Tim Wise episode, you should probably go check it out, because it was pretty good. And he put out a lot of great information, dropped a lot of jewels, and I think that's a show that everybody should watch. So definitely, if you haven't checked that out, check it out. We've had a lot of great guests on this show, so it doesn't hurt to go back and watch some of those old episodes, because definitely dropping some jewels in those. And then also, outside of that, it was an interesting week with so much going on in the news, and definitely it's going to be. So I'm going to go straight right into the to hell withs. Okay. So definitely have to do a to hell with to Stephen Paddock. It's crazy because people are calling that the most deadliest shooting in all of American history, but
no. The loophole there is in modern.
Now they're saying modern day history. Yeah, they had to change that up real quick. That's the loophole
there. Yeah, they're funny.
Yeah, but definitely we know that there's been more Native Americans and African Americans killed in countless mass shooting slaughters. And then the other thing is, why won't they just call this thing what it was? It was terrorism. He did a terrible thing. He caused mass fear and panic. And I know they're saying they want you to have a political agenda when you look up the word terrorist, but that just seems like a loophole to try to put it out on everyone else. I feel like I don't care where you were born. It could be the middle of the United States, but if you go out there, get a bunch of guns, and you decide to shoot up a bunch of people, that's a terrible thing. We should just call you a terrorist, not just a lone gunman. There are too many of these lone gunmen that happen to look a certain kind of way, and we don't want to call them terrorists with an agenda. So, but you get these white guys, let's just call it what it is. They're typically white, and they get inspired by Batman. They shoot up a movie theater. For some reason, they claim they're not racist, but they go shoot up a church, or they're going through teenage angst, so they just shoot up a high school or elementary school. I mean, what is that? We need to call it what it is. And I think the problem is that we're so busy looking for brown boys and black boys with a little bit of marijuana on them to lock them up. A lot of others go unchecked because of prejudice in the criminal justice system. So, that's my 2 cents on it. If you want to debate the topic, you guys know I'm always available on Facebook to do so. But yeah, definitely have to shout out to hell with for that, because that was crazy. But then always end on a positive note. So blessings, to those who were hurt by this senseless tragedy. A lot of families affected. They had over 50, I think it was like 59 that died. Yeah. Was the final count.
And then I think over 500.
Over 500 injured. So, we don't know the severity of all these injuries. Some of these could be life-changing injuries. So definitely blessing to all those people that were affected by that. That's horrible.
Before you move on, I do want to say that I think this kind of situation brings to the forefront that America always profiles men of color, and they dismiss people who are not men of color. If this doesn't wake up conversations about gun control and B, conversations about not profiling just people of color, I don't know what will, because I think it's ridiculous that this man had over 47 guns and no one ever thought. Do you know any black man in America that can have 47 guns and never have any suspicion from anybody?
And I know there's a lot of gun
That's
people
crazy.
out there that say, hey, you should be able to own a gun. You know what? And owning 1 or 2 guns, I give you up to 5 if you have a family of hunters.
But 47.
But 47, 10 plus, I think that's a little extreme. So, and that's ridiculous. But still, blessings to those people that were hurt by that. That's crazy. It is going to be a conversation we're going to have and go into more detail coming soon. So look for that episode. And then also, got to give a shout out to my dad, Herman Altar, celebrating his 55th birthday yesterday.
Woohoo!
Still 55 years young, because he looks good, can still go out there and chop up 5 miles, could do his 5Ks, no problem. So, blessings to him and my mother having a good time. And I know they're excited about an Incognito coming to Nashville soon. So blessings to them. But we're not going to hold things up any longer. Okay. We have our guests here in the studio. We're going to play a quick video. Before I play that quick video and bring up Mr. Will Jawando, just want to tell you a little bit about him for those that may not know. Will is an attorney, activist, and community leader from Silver Spring, Maryland, born to his Kenyan mother and Nigerian father. Received his bachelor's in psychology from Catholic University. I think I said that right. I'm going to have him correct me if I said it wrong.
Sociology.
Yeah,
because we got the same
University.
BA.
Yeah, so received his JD from Columbus School of Law. So CUA, Columbus School of Law. He's worked with the Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, Senator Sherrod Brown, and the Senator and then Senator Barack Obama. During the 8-year Obama administration, Will had the honor of serving as Associate Director of the White House of Public Engagement, followed by a position as advisor to U.S. Secretary of Education, Aaron Duncan. And Will works with a number of local community efforts, such as being co-leader of the African American Student Achievement Action Group, AASAG, which works with Montgomery County Public Schools and the community to close the gap of opportunity for African American students in the Montgomery County areas. Will is also passionate about education reform, criminal justice reform, and strengthening the relationship between minorities and our political system. Will has been featured in an array of national media outlets, such as NBC News, the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, MTV, and New York Magazine. So we're excited to bring him up. We're going to play a video because this kind of sums up, it's a little like cartoon video, but it kind of sums up a lot of the conversation we're going to be having with Will. He has so much insight on what he's been doing, and we need to celebrate men like him and the campaign that he's running right now in Montgomery County. So, Jay, can you kick that video, and we'll be bringing up Mr. Will Jawando.
Immigration, terrorism, healthcare, education. Do you have an opinion? Of course you do. These days, kids often get a bad rep. They are accused of not caring, being self-absorbed and apathetic, interested in the X factor, sports, shopping or gaming, and certainly not interested in politics. But actually, all of these things that you are interested in come back to politics. Decisions on immigration, policies for healthcare, house building, even the sale of computer games or building of sports stadiums all start with politics. Are you thinking of going on to further education? Hoping for a student loan? Where do you think the decisions about funding for education come from? You've got it. Politics. Whatever you think, there will be other people who think the same. Identifying the political party that most closely mirrors what you believe won't be that difficult. It's true that politics is not without its own image problems, and there have been scandals and bust-ups that have not shown our leaders at their best. But for better or worse, our political system is what we have, and the only way we can hope to make a difference is to get involved, even if it is only to put an X in a box. Having a vote is having a say. You wouldn't let anyone else decide what music you should listen to, would you? You would always want to have a say about what you wear, eat, or do for fun, wouldn't you? So why wouldn't you want to have a say about what happens to you or your world? Have your say. Use your vote.
So what's going on, everyone? We have with us Will Jawando. I'm excited about this. Good brother, fellow brother here at Reed Temple as well. So, definitely got to look out for our Christian brothers doing big things in the community. We're really happy to have them I met Will. When did I meet you? About 2 years ago or so?
I think so.
Yeah, and then and so I knew you was an attorney. I knew that you were, running for office at the time.
Yeah.
You was running for a congressional seat.
Yeah, 8th district in Montgomery County.
Yeah. So I mean, it seemed you've always been involved. I know some family members of mine that are also in politics. So I mean, obviously this has been a lifelong commitment.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and it's good to be with you and you as well.
Uh-huh.
I think that policy, like that video showed, I mean, getting engaged civically is what we have to do. I mean, we've done it since we've been in this country, and then even back on the continent of Africa where we all come from, right? So it's important. So yeah, it's not running for office is one thing, and that's important, but there's a lot of ways to be involved before that.
Exactly. And so one of the things I want to ask, and I think I ask any politician that comes on this show or any activist, what is it that spurred you into activism in the life of, because I mean, that's a real calling to take on a lifestyle where you serve people. Being an attorney in this city, there's so much more money that could be made doing other things, right? I mean, we know that.
Don't remind me.
But the fact that you say, hey, you know what? Instead of chasing dollars and all that, I'm going to do something that's going to help other people get to a place where they could be happy about being an American or about the opportunities that should be afforded to them. What got you on that path?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, it was really at a young age seeing inequity close up. I grew up right down the road here off New Hampshire Avenue in Montgomery County. And Montgomery County, though it's one of the wealthiest parts of the country, it's either the 11th or 12th wealthiest county if you take median income. It's got a lot of parts that aren't benefiting from that wealth, right? And I grew up in one of those parts. Where there's gang activity, and my dad came here from Nigeria on a scholarship, met my mom in Kansas. They moved here, split when I was young. And so I was really seeing early on the inequity in our school system, inequity in transportation and just availability of resources. But it really hit home for me when I was a teenager. One of my best friends got caught up just with the wrong folks and lost his life to gun violence. And we were, you couldn't have told me we were different people, that we weren't the same guy. And I remember being at his funeral, and I was just saying, so why is he in a box, and why am I sitting here? And at the time, I had just gotten a scholarship to St. John's private high school in D.C., and that really made me think. And I started thinking about the reasons. After I got mad and angry, I said, okay, so his mom worked 3 low-wage jobs, so she wasn't home after school, couldn't look after him. The school he went to, all the teachers didn't necessarily believe in him and didn't have the resources for him. Transportation system, his mom worked across town, took her 3 hours to get back and forth from cleaning houses in Bethesda to get back to where he lived in Briggs Cheney. So I started to realize that there were things outside of his control that were public policy things. I didn't know it at the time, but that impacted his situation. And so I made it my business as a teenager to start investigating what those things were, whether it would be equity in education or transportation or housing affordability, all those issues that impact your ability to succeed and to get that American dream or your piece of it. And so at the time, I didn't know I was going to become a civil rights attorney and run for office and do all that. But I can literally trace everything I've done since then to that moment. And that's what I tell young people, too. Everyone has those moments, right, when you realize what you're supposed to do or your motivation. So for me, that was it. And, there's other examples, but that was kind of the critical moment for me.
Wow. And that's important, too. I think that, people see that you start at an early age, and sometimes it's important that we turn tragedy, into triumph, and pay that forward the right way. Too often, many of our young men, the way they react to that kind of gun violence is to go out there and create more gun violence.
Exactly right.
So I could definitely appreciate someone who said, you know what, let me take the opportunities afforded to me and let me pay it forward so that gun violence shouldn't have to happen again at this rate that I seen it happen close by. I appreciate that. And there was something you said just about, I like the fact that, and in countless times that I've heard you speak on these issues, one thing I like is that you always can tie it in all together, right? I think sometimes we get so focused on one thing, we don't realize, it's all interconnected. Like even with all the protests and stuff going on now, people think it's just football, but it's bigger than that, It's police brutality, but then it's bigger than police brutality. We have to look at the economics. And something that's important is sometimes we ignore the fact that, okay, yeah, it's Montgomery County, but there's still poverty in it, right? And I've been living in the area for a while, so, I see it. People that live here see it, but on the outside looking in, you're thinking, it's all good. But we know a lot of that wealth is push to Rockville and Bethesda
Right,
and those areas. So I guess I would ask you, as someone who is running into that political arena, how do we open up those opportunities? Because I mean, even like I stay off of Briggs Cheney now.
Right.
Even when it comes to like just healthy food, I've taken a healthier lifestyle with my food choices, but sometimes you don't have that directly.
Yeah, it's hard to do it, right?
Yeah, you have to drive, a couple of places over. So, what do we do to start, I guess, bridging the gap there, or tie it in for like our viewers that are watching?
Yeah,
I know it's like a loaded question.
Yeah, it is. But, I'll try to unpack it the best I can, and cut me off if I go. But I think that's exactly right. One, it starts from recognizing that we're all interconnected, right? And that my well-being, whether I live in Bethesda or I live in Briggs Cheney, is connected to your well-being. And I think for the most part, most people can get that. Then you have to get that feeling and change your actions around that. And so from the public policy standpoint, we have to realize that some schools have more resources than others, right? Mm-hmm. And our job as public servants, as community members, is to say, okay, where's the greatest need, and how do we allocate resources in a way that's going to meet help the most people, or the people that are furthest behind, right? And so that's a policy question. I'm a big proponent of the Purple Line, for example, which is going to connect you all the way from Prince George's County all the way to across to Bethesda and University of Maryland, all the way in between. And it's the first time we're going to have an east to west connector, because now the red line goes around, but it doesn't connect, Exactly. So that was a big social justice issue, because we need that. So we needed to connect those places so people can work and have jobs and there can be growth. In our police system, we need to look at, okay, where there's high crime neighborhoods, what are we doing? What does community policing look like there? How are we investing not just in locking folks up, but in programs that are going to help get people in diversion programs and reduce recidivism, support them if they do get locked up, in programs that are going to either get them off of some sort of an addiction. So you have to look at the whole thing holistically, and not sweep it under the rug. I should have started there, because a lot of times we try to sweep things under the rug. We try to say, hey, we're great, we're a great place, everything's fine. But, in Montgomery County, we got 1.1 million people. Our school system grows 2,300 students a year. So that's like a Blair High School, a big high school a year is coming into the system. Most of our county is people of color now. And so we're changed. We're not the county of 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so you have to upgrade your thinking. And I think finally you need diverse leaders that understand these issues, right? For a long time you got people, when I'm elected and I'm claim it,
Yeah, we claim that with
claim
that
it.
I'll be only the second person of color ever to serve on the Montgomery County Council at large, and at large is when you represent the whole county. And the first one is the current county executive, who, when he ran, couldn't put his picture on his literature because he didn't want people to know he was black. So that was in the 80s. So that's a big thing for a county that's majority people of color. And so I think between having new leaders, diverse leaders who understand the interconnectivity of this stuff and have lived it too. I think having some lived experience and growing up in a part of the county where I did, and low income, and that helps. It's one thing between being theoretical, but actually knowing somebody.
Exactly.
So,
go ahead.
Oh, no.
Yeah, cut me off. No, that's good.
No, I wanted to ask a question about leadership. I feel like a lot of times when I talk to people of color about politics and voting, or why they're not voting, or the lack thereof, they're like, well, who's running? Like, I don't even know, who's running. And sadly, a lot of people said their very first time voting, period, in their entire life was when Barack Obama was on the ballot, and that was their only time voting. Can you talk to the people about how we can, A, change the stigma around voting, B, how we can learn ways to share information about the visibility of people of color who are on the ballot? Because I think people would be more inclined to vote if they actually knew who was running. I don't know if there's misinformation out there, but maybe talk to us about how we kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah, that's a great question. I often say voting is the end of the civic process, not the beginning. And what I mean by that is that you vote when you understand why it's important to vote. And so, before you vote, and there are some exceptions. I think Barack Obama was a transformational leader. I've been fortunate to work for him in the Senate and the White House. And some people were motivated to vote just because he was on the ballot. But outside of those kind of, what I would call just lightning bolt candidates, most of the time it's because you realize that your pothole on your street is connected to voting, that your school is going to get better, the resources at your school are connected to you voting, that getting a Whole Foods or a healthy food store in your neighborhood's connected to voting. And so, oftentimes I've created me and some others formed a nonprofit called Our Voices Matter, which its whole goal is to get underserved, underrepresented communities of color engaged in the civic process. So who do you write to about your street? Who do you write to about your school? When's the planning board? When's the school board meeting? How do things happen? What's the budget process, right? So you know how these things work. And I find that you get meaningful, lasting, and you can look at the black vote in the presidential. It was up for Obama and then way down for Clinton. And because if you can't just come to people every 2, 4, 6 years and say vote, if they don't have it connected to something. And so I think that civic education is important, connecting it to real life. When people know that, hey, my kid's school will get, I'm working with one school now to get a security door so people can't just walk in and out of the school. And you just take it real local. So that's a civic engagement thing, to go to the school board, to ask for that, to go to your principal, And so when you connect it, help us solve a local problem, I think that's when you win someone else. And they're like, of course I'm going to vote because I'm doing all this and it makes sense. I just think we miss it. And a lot of times black folk, people of color, we come 6 months, 3 months before an election, say, come out, vote for this person. And they may or may not vote, but it's not connected to anything. And so I think that's what we have to do. I think that's why, in addition to misinformation, but if you know about all this stuff, and it doesn't have to be everyone in the community because people are busy, but if you can get some leaders, a handful of civic leaders in every community who can help be the people that people look to and say, hey, why should I be voting, or what should I be doing? Then you start to build that civic capacity, because at the end of the day, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And the communities that speak up, they get attention. They get the ones that vote. If you look at voting rates, I can tell you, look any map across the country. You look at a community that votes at a 20% rate and a 90% rate. That 90%, there are going to be some good communities that have good amenities, that have good access to food, and the 20% are going to be your lowest income communities. That's just how it goes.
That's how it goes. Another question for you. So when it comes to voting, what if you don't identify as a Republican or a Democrat? Are you still able to vote in the primaries for some of these things? What if you're independent? What if you really just don't identify with the political sphere of America? Can you still vote in the primaries for some of these issues, or do you have to be identified as a Republican or Democrat in order to even vote for some of these things?
It depends. The answer in Montgomery County, in Maryland, you have closed primaries, so that means you have to be registered as a party to vote in that party's primary.
See, that's something too.
That's a big issue, and I'm actually in favor of open primaries. Not everyone is, but I tell people now, the way the system is currently structured, you want to register for a party because, and if you're in Maryland, if you're in Montgomery County, you want to register as a Democrat, even if you're an independent, because the Democrat most likely is going to win. Like I'm running for county council, all 9 members are Democrats. So there's a range of Democrats. There's a conservative, there's more liberal, more moderate. But if you want to have a say, you need to be. If you're an independent, which is the fastest growing registration right now. You have no say in who gets on the ballot in the November general. And by then, it's already decided because you're just deciding against the Democrats and Republicans. So it depends on your state. But in this area, most of these, I'm thinking D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, most of these areas have closed primaries where you have to decide. So that's a whole issue. You can be independent in your thinking, but be strategic in how you register and you vote. I'm
glad I asked that question because I believe I'm still currently registered as an independent.
But you got time.
And I know a lot of people, just my generation in particular, the millennials, just speaking to people.
I'm an old millennial. I'm still holding on.
Yeah. But speaking to my peers, they feel like, for example, when going into the presidential election between Clinton and Trump, a lot of people, I'm speaking about the people who I run with, they were not happy with either candidate. And they didn't feel like Democratic Party or the Republican Party represented them in any way. So, going forward, what suggestions can you give young people to get them involved so that way they can, I guess, transform the party and make sure that the issues that they have that are important to them can be heard by either party?
Right. And you just gave a suggestion. I mean, I think that's what you have to do. Like, you can't complain about the outcomes if you're not engaged, right? These people that, look, I understand if you didn't like Hillary and Super Predator and all that. And I have problems with that myself. But if you went in there and whoever you voted for in the primary and you didn't vote for her or you didn't vote, I mean, that was part of what got us this red, orange man right now. So 45. And so I think you have to engage in the process. Look, politics is messy, but it's the system we have, you know, and we are in this country with all of our flaws. We have the opportunity to participate freely without worrying about getting shot for the most part, you know, where there is state sanctioned violence and police brutality. But when you're participating politically, this is one of the most free places to do it. And so we have to do that. Otherwise, we can't complain about what we get. And so I think get in a party, get in there, and then you can be a Democrat and then fight for open primaries or fight for more political parties in the system. I mean, you can fight for that simultaneously, but vote in the meantime.
In the meantime,
you know, I mean, that's my thing. I mean.
Yeah, and I think that's an important strategy that you pull up, because I was also guilty of that. I was independent. What made me change was I was pulling for you, and then what happened is Jamie Ranskin got in there, because I remember looking at the option that was there, I was like, okay, well, I gave him my vote, and I had a conversation with a friend. They was like, yeah, but you know, sometimes we look at politics. I don't see anybody under there that's really fighting for us and, you know, repping for us. And I think what happens is, because we don't understand the strategy behind the process, we don't get the person who reps for us in our various cities early enough. We don't grasp onto them. Right. And people always say that, well, rich people, you know, they control the vote anyways. Well, one thing you can find out about, and you already kind of stated that, 90% of wealthy people participate in a vote. Every millionaire just about is going to vote because they understand the importance of it. And when we see areas being gentrified, like even in Baltimore and the Mount Vernon areas, when you hear about those community meetings they're having there, the people who run those meetings and the people who are engaged are typically those who are white. Right. So when they're making decisions on, hey, that one bar down there, is that still needed? Right. But it might be a city black staple. Right. But they're voting it out. But none of the black folks who even visit that place go to that meeting and say, hey, no, we like so-and-so's barbecue. We like so-and-so's barbershop. And we're not involved early on.
It's as simple as, if you choose not to vote or participate civically, you are giving away your power. I mean, that's just what it is. The two things that change this world and this country, the only two things, in my opinion, are organized people and organized money. When you have both, you're really powerful, but you can do some with either one. And people power is that's the whole concept behind one man, one vote. It's why we, you know, have the right to vote, and so a right that we didn't always have. And, you know, so I think you're exactly right. We have to get out and run yourself. If you don't like the candidates, run. There's an election every 2 years. Sometimes more than that if they're local elections, off-year elections. So run, get behind a candidate, organize, learn, take the time to learn how to do it. You mentioned Baltimore, like, you know, understanding the process. There are district in Maryland. You have 3 House members and 1 senator for each legislative district, and so you get 3 votes. In a suburb or Baltimore City, there is often this district it's a mostly black district where there's always a white person that gets elected, and it's because those people that want to vote for that person come out and vote just for that person. You know, so it says you could vote for 3, they vote for 1.
Wow.
And so it's just deep when you get to the processing of these things that we just don't understand. Because when you vote for 1, you're not only voting for that person, but you're denying other people a vote, right? So, wow. And so it's just there's process and strategy to all this stuff, and we just need to be. When we're not engaged, we suffer. Our businesses get shut down. Our schools don't get the resources, and so we're all one community. But that we need to be on equal footing with our other community members and not give away our power.
I want to talk about this. Sure. So from the grassroots level, what do you think it is as to why we, like, the things that you're talking about right now, like, I've never heard of this before. I knew there was strategy behind it, and I went to college, but no one ever broke it down to me. For example, when Trump won and they were saying he won because of the electoral college vote, I still to this day don't really understand it. I get that there's more population in some states, but then when I started doing my research, I'm like, okay, well, that was implemented back when slaves were considered 2/3 of a man and yada, yada, yada. So I guess the question is, do we need to start talking about this in church? Because that's where a lot of African Americans congregate. Do we talk about this in the barbershop? I mean, what do we do where we're really understanding? Because it seems like it's a lot more than just educating, go out there and vote. Here's a black guy running. It seems like you said, there's strategy behind it. Yeah. So how can we angle it so that people understand the benefits, how it can benefit you as a person of color, especially when it comes to the police force, right? Isn't that a part of the vote as well? Voting for your sheriff and whatnot?
In a lot of places, the mayor or the county executive selects who the police chief is.
See?
You know, so all that stuff is connected. I mean, that's why I often talk about, again, voting is the end of the civic process. Voter education, civic education, and we need that back in the schools. We need government, we need civics, which is not, has kind of left the schools.
Okay.
And, it's one of the things that's gotten cut. So just having a basic understanding of how the electoral process works, who represents what. And I think that needs to be any place we are. Churches, barbershops, beauty salons, the go-go, wherever. I mean, we need to have dedicated, any social or community event or organization should have a civic component, because there's just too much at stake. I mean, there's literally billions of dollars at stake. I'm running for a county council that manages a $6 billion budget. And just to put that in context, 9 people decide how that's spent. That's bigger than 10 state budgets. So in Montgomery County. So when people think that, doesn't impact me or this, no, it directly impacts you, especially the local stuff. And I would say that's where you start. Learn about your local stuff first, because your day to day is your local. It's the county, it's the city, it's the municipality, it's your mayor, it's your city council. And I think that's why organizations like Our Voices Matter and others doing work across the country, there's a whole bunch of organizations that are in here in the communities doing this kind of grassroots work, trying to educate people and help them solve local problems, and through solving those problems, teaching the civic process. But I think every organization has to do this, because, like I said, there's just too much at stake. The Electoral College is a perfect example. Like, people are like, what happened with that, right? And that's been around forever. We have to know that. We have to know that which states matter, and how this works, and if you don't like it, again, there's a movement around the popular vote. People want to move to the join that at the same time, but understand the current process. Like, no one's saying don't change things, and that's not because I think the energy that the young people are bringing now, who are entering this movement, either through the police accountability lens or whatever it is, that's great. We need that. Sometimes you need a spark, but use that to learn about the whole game. Don't just see a little bit. Learn the whole thing.
The whole game.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, because I'm listening and I'm thinking about, when you look at the strategy, and this comes around every 4 years, it really should be more like every 2 years, because you see an influx of voting, right? But we can't even get people to vote every 4 years. But even when you look at the strategy behind that, you look at, like, Ohio's typically going to go red, Tennessee's going to go red, most of your southern states, and then Virginia's going to swing, Colorado can swing. So it's kind of like, if people are really want to understand the strategy, especially if we want to get our candidates in there early, I guess it doesn't hurt to vote Republican, or to even identify as a Republican in a red state, just so that way you can kind of like infiltrate that thing early on. It
depends. I mean, I think, I'm a Democrat. I think registering as a Democrat, I think what you want to try to do is, get more Democrats registered, so so you can, win over that district. Now, but that being said, if you're a moderate Republican, which is a thing of the past now, and I know there are some folks out like that, register and be a part of that party, because I think one of the things that has happened with the Republican Party has been hijacked by these, Tea Partiers and the racists and everything, and I worked in the Senate, in the House for a number of years, and there were Republicans that, were at least you could talk to, you could get something done and compromise on something. But now those people are getting challenged and primaried from the right. So there's a lot of Republicans I know of them that are just mad about Trump. All right, get in there and fight for the soul of your party, because it's now I think Democrats have more good ideas and are more, but we need everyone involved. There's just no one cannot get involved. But I wouldn't join a party that you don't believe in just to influence the outcome, because eventually the demographics are on our side as Democrats. I mean, there are more young people of color. If everyone voted, if black people just voted, we would win every election.
I mean, Tennessee alone would have went blue.
Georgia, a lot of these southern states. So I think it's more of an organizing, and look, they're working hard to keep us from voting. We haven't talked about any of the things like gerrymandering or, voter ID laws and all these things that they're putting in place so we can't vote, because they know if we do vote, they'll lose. And so,
can we talk about it just a little bit?
Sure.
What exactly is
gerrymandering?
Gerrymandering.
So that's when you draw lines. So every 10 years is a census, and based on that census, you draw the basically the election districts, and that happens at the federal level, so for congressional districts, obviously Senate is statewide, and then it happens at the state legislative district, so how they draw the lines and what district you're going to be in. And they have it so precise now that they, so for example, they will cut up a majority black area, like they'll cut through Atlanta and Georgia so that they give enough of Atlanta to all these different Republicans that the blacks can't come together in that community and elect somebody.
Wow.
Yeah. Or they'll put all the African Americans in one district, and then you get a district like where John Lewis represents, one of my mentors, so whether you only get one, be able to have one person that represents your interests. So that's something that is, I think, corrosive and needs to be stopped. And the Democrats do it too, but the Republicans have taken it to a whole another level as far as just how they cut these maps. And that's based on the census, and that's, then on the voter ID laws, you have all these things where you can use a gun registration to vote, but you can't use your student ID. And in some states,
How is that possible?
State legislators passed it. People that represent certain people passed it and said, because the Constitution gives states a lot of latitude in the time, place, and manner, and that's the language, on how voting happens. And so they've taken that to say, you can only vote on these days, and cutting out early voting, which we know helps us because we're working and we're busy. Mm-hmm. Saying you have to get a special ID, and we know who doesn't have IDs: elderly, people of color, low-income people. And so there's all these things that have added up to suppress the vote. But that being said, that's why it's so important when we do vote, because we've got to roll these things back.
I'm happy we're having this conversation. We're definitely got to have you on back again, because I wanted to get into some of your local programs before you left today,
Sure.
especially in the middle of everything that's going on. But this is great information, because there's a lot of stuff that you said that a lot of people just don't know.
Right.
And they need to be educated on that. I know that you're really big in education, and you've done a lot of stuff with education reform in the area. One program that I know that you've helped start was AASAG. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that program?
Sure.
Because I think that's important, because when you look at where you are now, it's because you decided to take advantage of educational opportunity, but then also seeing where there's obviously a gasp or just a big gap in between those opportunities when it's being afforded to African Americans.
Yeah.
I was actually involved with the PTSA out there in Montgomery County for a little while, so I've seen it firsthand as a delegate for Argyle Middle School.
Oh, wow.
When I would go there to the delegate meetings, it's like, wow, I'm like one of the few black parents here. Yeah. And a lot of things are deciding, like, it goes over your head, and you go to a couple and you're like, wait a minute. That's jacked up. So yeah, if you could tell people about that program, I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good example, along with our conversation, of like a local just group of folks getting together and saying, hey, we want to make sure our children, and in this case African American children, have the same access to opportunity and resources that everyone else does in Montgomery County. And traditionally a great school system. We spend over $2.5 billion of that $6 billion budget on the schools. One of the highest per pupil expenditures in the country. But it's not, we see at the same time, a growing gap between performance of white students and African American students and Latino students. And so this group was formed to help educate the community about this issue, but also come up with solutions to recommend both at the school building level, but also at the system level of how we can, work to reduce that gap and provide opportunity. And so we meet monthly, we make recommendations to the school system, we get data from them, we review it, we testify at their budget hearings about programs we think are gonna help reduce that gap. And so it's just a collection of 30 or 40 people that come together. I'm one of the co-leads of it and was there when it began, that now has grown, and now we're actually grown and we're doing programming in specific schools. So we're in 4 middle schools, Argyle's one of them actually that you mentioned.
Nice.
Where we're working to organize black parents or parents of black children at those schools, so that they understand what the issues are, help them solve. And I mentioned White Oak Middle School, or I didn't mention White Oak, but I mentioned the security door. So one of the issues we're working on with the White Oak parents is getting the security doors. It's something basic like that. And so that they can see that hopefully successfully happen, and then they'll understand, hey, I need to be an advocate on all these issues, right? And so there's nothing like saying to someone like, I want to help you create a better environment for your child, right? And, you can't get more local and personal than that. And so we're working in those 4 middle schools to do that. And again, that's our parents, like my friend who was lost his life, his mom wasn't able to do that. She was working hard. So how do you get a subset? And I'm not saying, that's the thing about activism. Not everyone has to do it at the same level.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be connected to people who are doing it, and offer your help, at least in some part. Like, you can come to one event. We're busy. You can't do everything, but make it a priority to find out, to be connected to people who are involved, and to participate in some way. We're not saying you have to be. It's unrealistic to say I need you at every PTA meeting every month. That's just not going to happen for our folks. We're working, but it might be realistic to say, hey, I'm part of a group of 10 people where we rotate who goes.
I like that.
And then we
Oh, yeah.
And then we write
that.
and we write the notes. So there's ways to do that, and that's what we try to do with our group.
I like that.
I do have a question. Sorry, I'm kind of like back to what you're saying. A group of 10 people and one of us goes. Do you feel like because society changed that our trust factor as a community has changed? For example, back when I was growing up in the 90s, we always had like block parties, right? And it was a trust factor. Like, my mom would have people she could lean on in the community who would just pick us up, take us where we need to go. And I do believe my parents, I think, actually did rotate who would go to PTA, or if my parents missed it, our neighbor two doors down would come by, and this is what they talked about here in the papers. I feel like that kind of trust factor amongst ourselves is just not, I don't see it visible anymore. Do you think that plays a role in why maybe we don't share information as widely as we once did?
I mean, I think the general American, we get real theoretical now, but the general American kind of isolationism and automation and me kind of mentality has hurt our community in particular. Yeah, so I think that's happened with everybody. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing, but in our community, I think it's really bad. And our institutions, whether it be the church or our civic associations, whatever, are not as strong. Or block party, so people who throw those, usually it's a local civic association that does that. Yeah, we don't see that as much, and we need to get back to that, because we all need help. I mean, that's what community is about. So I would say that is playing a factor. That being said, I don't think it has to be that way. I've seen it not be that way in community. I've seen where communities come together and come out of their buildings and get together on an issue. And so it just needs a little push. I don't think it's too far gone, but it just needs a little push. And
then it's it's somewhat switching gears, but it all relates. We talking about the trust factor. Obviously there's a trust issue between people of color and then law enforcement, right? And this is a conversation that's been going on in America for a while now, with the deaths of people that I have like on this shirt.
Yeah.
So
running out of room. Yeah,
exactly. And one thing I've heard you talk about it before, and maybe you can bring it up a little bit today when we talk about police reform. But there's some creative things I know that's being done in Virginia, or some representatives are working on out there about how to kind of like manage those reform efforts, as far as who we're bringing in as police, and then ways to try to maybe like manage like the statistical data of the conviction rate for people of color living in a certain district. Maybe you can talk to our people a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's a number of mechanisms, right? Like police accountability boards that have where you have citizens who are on there and reviewing when there's a misconduct case or something like that, and they actually have authority. One of the big things we've seen is like those bodies need to actually have authority to do stuff, right? They can't just be recommending, because then it's just it's just paper. It doesn't matter. And then also you need to have a watchdog, which could be that group or another group that's looking at the data in a hardcore way. Now we just formed. It's funny you asked me this week. I'm part of a group called Make the Covenant, which is a Reed Temple effort along with other churches, where we took President Obama's recommendations from his task force on community policing and rated 19 jurisdictions on a scale of 0 to 33, 0 being worst, 33 being the highest. And there were 11 factors, and you could get a 0 or 3 on a factor, through 3 on a factor. And that's at makethecovenant.org if people want to go check that out. Things like transparency in your on your website, use of force policies. Is your police force diverse? Do they live in district? Because we know when folks live where they police, they're more likely to understand folk and not see it as them or those animals or those other people, which we've heard police officers say. So we rate on a whole scale of 11 factors, And the whole point of that is not to say, hey, you're bad, Prince George's County, or you're good, or you're okay, Montgomery County. It's to say, how do you give the information to ordinary folks who they can go out and have a conversation with their police organization and say, hey, what are you all doing in this area, right? Because that's really what needs to happen, is that dialogue, and there needs to be accountability on both sides.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah, so I think you're seeing some interesting. That's one thing we're doing. I think, like you said, in Virginia, they have an interesting approach. I think these police accountability boards are a good approach. We need to look at these union contracts that give police, for example, if they're involved in a shooting, they have 48 hours before they even have to come in and talk about it, where they say get their story straight and all that. So there's a whole bunch of things embedded in there that we need to look at. So, and I could talk all night about police reform, but
in addition to looking at police reform, what can we do as just regular, civilians about the whole gun law situation? Because I know on what show was that where he showed all of the senators that voted for the gun laws to pass.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't think of
the guy's name. But what can we do? Because in my mind, that's a really big issue. Yeah. There's just a problem in my mind in America where people are allowed to own multiple guns. So for all the viewers watching, including myself, what is the steps that we need to take to make sure that there are some kind of restrictions on gun laws, not just people identifying as having a mental health illness, but maybe even a restriction of how many you can own?
Right. Yeah, I think, look, the crazy thing about this issue, is that 90% of Americans are for like some basic things like background checks, universal background checks, and on limits, even to limits to, capacity of magazines and all these other things. Even the NRA this week came out and said that they want to look at the rule for this bump mechanism that allows you to shoot 100 rounds in 7 seconds, and allowed this crazy guy to kill all these just innocent people and just target practice because he was able to shoot so many. So there's agreement. This has become, but Republicans have used it as a wedge issue. I think what we can do locally is, one, know where everyone stands. Mm-hmm. That's why information, like you said, is important. And then we just have to organize. It's a continual organization. I mean, this is something where I don't know how many people have to die before we connect it to sensible gun laws. I mean, it's one of those things where there's no easy answer. I just think we need to outnumber the people that aren't. We need to vote out, just like the NRA votes out people that are against them. We have to vote out people. We have to have people that come in and say, I'm voting on the gun issue. Mm-hmm. Like, that's my issue.
Right.
And if you're not with me on this, I can't vote for you. And right now we don't have that. If they have it on their side, we don't have it on our side. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
And I want to ask this question. Is the reason why they are voting for these laws because they're getting paid for it?
Well, they do get political contributions, and that's a big part of it. Even if it's not directly from the NRA, who does make contributions, there's all these back channels and, secret money that flows from people who are supporters of the NRA to these candidates. And then they'll actually put someone up against you. They will put a more conservative candidate to run against you if you're a Republican and you don't vote with them most of the time. So, again, until you have that counterbalance of political force, that people are just fed up. And I think it's each time this happens, because it's like, I don't know how many times I had to watch President Obama come up when there was a mass shooting, and he almost felt helpless. Because the only way we're going to do it is if people organize around that issue and say, I'm voting. And I think you're starting to see that, but we still have work to do, because it all feeds into these gerrymandered districts too. Like, so if you can't get, that's why we got to take out the senators, because those are statewide.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So because they can't gerrymander a state,
okay,
right? So if you look at who voted against these bills and we target and we knock off one of these senators that votes with the NRA based on the gun issue, then things will start to change. But until we do that, it's going to be very hard. But we can do it.
This is deep, you guys. This is really deep, and for me, it's problematic because I feel like, as a country, we're such a capitalist society. When do we have, moral values where it's like, well, because I want to get paid, because I want money, I'm going to vote for this issue because I'm getting paid for it, even though I know it affects people's lives. Like the fact that you don't have enough, compassion in your heart to realize that a life is much more than worth a dollar. You know what I mean? And for me, it's frustrating. It's frustrating because people who are usually, until it hits them at home, I feel like that's how America is. Until it hits you at home, then it's a problem. Kind of the same way when it comes to like homosexual rights, right? People were like, oh, we don't want to vote for gay rights. But the moment that these senators or whomever, someone in their family was gay, that's when they were like becoming a little more open to changing policy and changing their paradigm. And for me, it's just frustrating. So I just wanted to know if there's a way to, I'm sure this is a bigger conversation, but Vegas bothers me. And obviously, once a law is voted for, we can't change it just overnight.
And I would say Brady Campaign is a great resource.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You can Google Brady Campaign. They have organizing and they have your stats by state, and they can help you, lower the bar. So, like, if you're just like, how do I get involved in my local area? That's a good place to start.
And speaking of being involved in the local area, because we only have about 3 minutes left, and at the same time, you do have an active campaign now in Montgomery County, and I want to, we haven't talked about it. You've been giving out a lot of great information, but these are the kind of people need to put in office. I'm gonna go ahead and say that. So I want to, give them some information about, where you're running and where they can follow you and all the different things you have going on in Montgomery County right now.
I appreciate that. So I'm Will Jawando. I'm running for County Council at Large, which means countywide in Montgomery County, Maryland. Anyone in Montgomery County knows where it is, about 1 million people: Silver Spring, Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Tacoma Park, Rockville, Briggs Cheney. And that's where I'm born and raised. The election is the primary, when we got to vote in primaries, is June 26th of next year, so we got about 8.5 months. And I'm running for one of 4 at-large seats. My whole platform is about keeping the promise of Montgomery County: good school, quality living wage job, safe neighborhood, aging in place, being able to retire there and afford it. And that's slipping away for a lot of people. We've got a lot of disparities in our school system. We don't have paid family and sick leave. We can't afford childcare. We've got a lot of aging people. So we got to do that in a new way while embracing our diversity. So that's where I'm trying to do, and trying to build a movement to keep those promises, the basic promise why people move to our area. And I think we can do it. We've got a lot of great resources. We've got a lot of smart people. We've got a lot of activity in our community, but we just need to make sure we have new, fresh voices that are helping navigate us through this new time as we grow. So if people want to learn more, they can go to willjawando.com, and it's Will, JAWANDO.com. You can follow me on Instagram, Will Jawando, on Twitter @WJawando, and Facebook, Will Jawando. But would love to have people involved and learn more. And I appreciate y'all having me on.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not that hard to get involved. I actually registered myself to help with the campaign.
We'll be reaching out to you.
Yeah. Actually, they reached back really quick. Yeah, so there's a lot of good information. I see that you guys had a block party not too long ago, right there in Briggs Cheney, where they had food and everything, but at the same time they was just out there with the people,
And that's what it's about, man. It's grassroots. I mean, I'm participating in a public election fund, first of its kind in Maryland. So I can't take corporate money, no PAC money, no special interests, only community money, and only up to $150. So we're trying to do grassroots contributions. And anyone from Montgomery County that gives me a contribution, it's matched at a certain level by the county. So that's another thing, political giving. We could have a whole show on that. When someone gives even $5, they're vested and they understand to a candidate. And people don't understand the power of their money. Remember, organized people organize money. So no matter how little, it matters. Saw Bernie Sanders, he had all these little contributions, they added up. So that's something we need to do as our community too, is support. Don't just talk about it, support our folks.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot here. And Will, because we're out of time now, but Will, we definitely appreciate you coming on. The work you're doing is amazing. I mean, we didn't even get to talk. I mean, your wife is a powerhouse too. She's out there doing her thing. So we're definitely have to have you on again. I mean, we have a lot of time before we get to, you said July, right?
The primary.
June is the primary.
26th.
June 26th.
June 26th.
So we have a lot of time till then. I mean, we're definitely have to have you come back on to have more of these conversations, and to keep on directing people to where to get the information. There's a worldwide thing going on, a national thing, a statewide, but we know we're right here. We both live in Montgomery County, in that area.
Well, I just became a Montgomery County resident. I was Prince George's for the past 3.5 years. So.
Well, welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, so definitely got to get involved.
A month in.
You put out some great information. I'm pretty sure people learned a lot, and I appreciate it. Tell people one more time where they can find you.
Yeah, willjawando.com, @willjawando on Instagram, @WJawando on Twitter. Look for Will Jawando on Facebook. Look forward to hearing from folks. And I respond to my messages. That's how Juan got me.
Yeah, he does respond to his messages, so hit him up. Kat, tell them where they can find the Nitty Gritty.
Sure, you can find the Nitty Gritty at the Nitty Gritty Show on Instagram and Facebook, and then we are also on Twitter at TBJ_Nitty Gritty.
All right, so look, that's been another great show. Will, once again, thank you for coming on, sir. Excited about what you're doing and the changes you're going to make in Montgomery County. And look, guys, this has been another Nitty Gritty show. It's your boy, Jay DeCosta.
It's your girl, Katniss.
And together we are
The Nitty Gritty.
The Nitty Gritty. We out.
Thanks.